All right, all right. We are back for another midweek interview. I guess this one's a little bit different because we're going in house for this one. Um, we've had the great Ramon Foster, Josh Pate, Jabari Davis, and now Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports can count himself among that company for the Wednesday Big Orange podcast interview. Austin, what's up?
Hey guys, yeah, this basically kind of started because in our text conversation, I guess Sunday, Charlie started going off about something. I was like, oh, let's just do this Wednesday. Let's just have this conversation on y'all's show. I'll do it this Wednesday and we'll see where it goes.
Turns out the what we were John about, it came to fruition. Ended up being real. Tennessee's getting completely screwed in the college football playoff and in the bowl games. It's actually worse than even we knew at that moment.
Yeah.
And we'll get into it all. I guess to set the stage here of this discussion. So it's me, Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan is also here. I was gonna say if people are only listening on audio, but this is probably only gonna end up being a YouTube video. But Zach Reagan, Austin Stanley here. And so last night, college football playoff rankings come out. Tennessee is at number 7. That wasn't necessarily surprising. It's stupid because Tennessee has a better resume in a lot of different ways than Alabama. But regardless, I think we all expected that to happen. But then this news comes out that Ohio State is lobbying to not play in the Rose Bowl where their loser ass should sit. And they're mad. They're pouting. Oh, we lost to Michigan again. So we have to play in the Rose Bowl. And so now they're trying to take Tennessee's spot in the Orange Bowl. And this idiot that they put up there on the show last night, Boo, whatever his face is. And this is what I have to say about that guy. I got a little sound ready.
Boo this man.
Screw that guy. Boo that man. He got up there and he was like, saying, well, we wouldn't even be surprised if Alabama was ahead of Ohio State in the rankings next week. Or he said something along those lines. Who knows what could happen? What are you even talking about? This guy was up there just saying anything, just whatever. And I don't know. I was beside myself. If Tennessee loses this Orange Bowl bid and we have to go play Tulane, no disrespect to Tulane, I actually think that would be a fine football game and they'd probably give Tennessee a good shot. But I don't want to play Tulane. This is so terrible. Your take, Austin. Let's just get going.
So are you a don't shoot the messenger guy, or are you just shooting the stupid messenger if it's Boo Corrigan?
Well, it is. He was the sacrificial lamb for the college football playoff. He's the AD at NC State. But he had to go out there and spin the stupidity that they put in those rankings. So,
but he did a terrible job doing it.
Okay, so bad.
It's like, what is he even talking about with Bama jumping Ohio State when nobody plays? And so like, there's no adding to any type of resume. I mean, are they waiting for transfer portal news to change ratings or rankings?
I think the only thing is like if LSU blows out Georgia, maybe it makes that LSU loss not look so bad. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of that they could even throw out there.
Tennessee's LSU win looks even better. And then look, there's a bunch of mess going on. And so let's start with Alabama versus Tennessee, because that's where we kind of got fired up in our not fired up, but Charlie got a little excited and I was like, all right, let's do this thing live. So my thought on Alabama and Tennessee in these rankings right now, because of the Hendon Hooker injury, I am okay with Tennessee being behind Alabama if that's the reason why the committee is doing it. They have to tell us that, because I think if you line up Alabama right now and Tennessee right now, I think Alabama will probably win. I don't know what the line would be. I mean, it was Bama -9 in Knoxville. I don't know what the line would be with Joe Milton at quarterback, because Hendon Hooker was phenomenal in that game. Jalen Hyatt was great as well. So I think without Hendon Hooker, there's a significant downgrade for Tennessee. And so you also have to kind of look at what the committee's goal is. Is their goal to rank the teams in order of best team? Is it best resume? Is it a balance of best resume and best team? Because right now, I think Alabama is a better team than Tennessee because of Hooker's out. And that's the only reason. Like resumes, there's zero chance that Bama's resume stacks up to Tennessee, even if they gave up 63 points and lost to South Carolina. If Hooker's healthy, I think Tennessee should absolutely be ahead of Alabama. That's just how I feel about it. But it didn't feel like that was the committee's reasoning for why they put Alabama over Tennessee. They just threw out some nonsense and didn't directly say, yeah, the quarterback injury had a lot to do with this.
He did, at least something I saw, at least a quote of him. I don't know whether I saw an actual video clip of it because I didn't watch the show. I'm not giving them that pleasure. But
me either.
But I think I saw someone quote that he did mention that Tennessee is without their Heisman.
Yeah, but there was a lot of like body of work talk. There was the South Carolina loss was a big deal. Like,
yeah,
I think the only reason that Tennessee can be behind Alabama is Hendon Hooker. That's the only reason, the only justification.
I mean, here's where I take. Go ahead.
I think if Alabama and Tennessee, like, they think that one of those teams might have an outside chance to make the playoffs somehow and jump Ohio State, and they don't want Tennessee to be that team because, like you said, with Joe Milton there at quarterback, who knows what happens in that game? Mm-hmm. Do you want a Tennessee team with Joe Milton in the playoff? Obviously Tennessee fans do, but I don't think the committee does. So to me, I feel like because we saw with the way they ranked LSU below Florida State, Oregon below Oregon State because of those head-to-head games. They're real inconsistent with Tennessee and Alabama, and I think it comes down to them having a shot at the playoff, and they don't think Tennessee with Milton, which I understand deserves that, but I don't necessarily think you can be inconsistent when you've put all that other stuff there with LSU and Oregon.
I mean, here's where I am completely just offended by any of that. Yeah, you do have to take a step back. What exactly is the criteria? And of course, they don't say that. Ultimately, what their criteria really is that they want to make the most money. That's the beginning and the end of this entire thing. And you have to start there. Yes, it's a cynical take. And yes, it's the truth. They want to make the most money. Who is going to get them the matchups that people will watch? They've done a horrific job of doing that in years past. Nobody wants to watch Alabama and Clemson again. Nobody wants to watch Alabama and Georgia play again. Nobody wants to see that. It's boring and it's terrible. And so here you have to start there. Like, that's the motivation, is all they want to do is make money. But when they come out and they have these stooges give these reasons, oh, well, it's Hendon Hooker. I mean, obviously the resume doesn't stack up. We've already established that. But it's Hendon Hooker being out. When you look historically, they had a team that won the playoff with a backup quarterback, with a third-string quarterback, in fact, Cardale Jones in 2014. So you can't really say that. I mean, and he won. He came into the Big Ten championship game, I believe, for what's his face, Barrett, whoever.
JT Barrett.
JT Barrett.
Yeah.
And then came in, won the Big Ten championship, went to the playoff, all that stuff.
Was it Braxton Miller, the starter that year? And then Miller goes down, then JT Barrett goes down, then it's Cardale No School Jones.
Yeah, and he goes out. Ultimately, I think the next year lost his job. I think won the national championship, and the next year lost the job again. It's ridiculous. But nonetheless, I mean, you had a backup win national championship. And then Tennessee goes out this week and beats Vandy by 60. Yeah, Joe Milton in the rain looks like overthrow Joe, as everybody's been talking about him as. But also, he hits a giant pass to Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt is still on this team. Brew McCoy is still on this team. You know, all these guys, Jabari Small, Jalen Wright, Dylan Sampson, they all go for giant games in that one. They're all still playing, will all still be healthy at any bowl game. Like, this criteria that, like, well, Hendon's out, there's no way that Tennessee, you have no proof of that. Tennessee,
I just
Vandy by 60 without that guy. And Tennessee, I think where there's really no proof is that Tennessee had the expectations from, like, Vegas had ratcheted back. What was Tennessee? 10-point favorite in that one?
Against Vandy?
Yeah.
14.
That's, and I think with Hooker, they're probably 20, 21, 24,
22-ish,
something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Like Vegas adjusts their expectations. They won by 60. I mean, that just is like, there is just zero proof where I guess you can take a step back and say that quarterback position at Tennessee is needed with Milton. Also, we do not have proof that Tennessee as a football team is not as good, because they went out in the immediate game after that and smashed a team that they were only favored by 14 over. So
yeah,
that's ridiculous reasoning to me, just in my personal opinion on top of the ridiculousness of saying that Alabama, who lost to Tennessee, has a better resume than Tennessee. But
yeah, so I think the Cardell Jones Ohio State example from, I guess that was the very first playoff, wasn't it? Because I remember that. I remember my stance was like, I think you have to take quarterback injuries into account for these things. But I don't think that Ohio State team was centered around the quarterback position like the Vols are with Hendon Hooker or Bryce Young in Alabama. That was an Ezekiel Elliott freshman season. They had a great defense. That was probably the first Bosa brother go around or something like that. So I just think it's because of what Hendon Hooker is to the team and how they run this offense. That's the reason why Tennessee was in this position, because Hooker was a Heisman candidate, potential Heisman frontrunner. The offense scores the most points in the country. The defense gives up, 20 something points a game, but Tennessee's beating people by 3 touchdowns because of Hooker, where he's the guy. He was probably the best player in college football up until he tore his ACL.
Well, I mean, I get it with Hooker and not being there. I fully understand that. And I don't think anybody would argue for Tennessee at this point, even if USC or TCU loses, to be in the playoff. Like that,
right.
That ship has sailed. I think it really matters to Tennessee fans because the Sugar Bowl and what Charlie kind of prefaced there about the Rose Bowl and the fact that Tennessee could get shafted all the way down to the Cotton Bowl because of this ranking. If it was flipped, Tennessee would have no worries this morning. They'd know they were going to the Sugar Bowl no matter what happens this weekend. I think that's the biggest issue with all of this.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, so the additional thing with this is that now Ohio State apparently behind closed doors or something, and according to Kirk Herbstreit, Ohio State doesn't want to play in the Rose Bowl because babies don't want to play for 2 years in a row in the Rose Bowl. And what infuriated me is, like, I was listening to an analysis of this morning, and somebody was like, well, if Tennessee would have taken care of their business. Well, I'm sorry, did Ohio State take care of their business?
Yeah, right.
No, they didn't. And so we should get punished because Ohio State sucked a big one against Michigan? How's that our fault?
At home?
That's at home. A far more egregious loss, I would very much argue, than losing to a South Carolina team at their place in a legitimately hostile environment with a quarterback who has miraculously turned in 2 ridiculous performances in a row. Now, if that was the single good game that Rattler had played all year, I would go, all right. But he followed it up the next week and went and beat Clemson.
But he scored half the points in the Clemson game that he did against Tennessee, and it's just
his defense is a lot better than Tennessee's defense. But
I think that Florida game the week before, the way they beat South Carolina, I can't get past that. Like that's one of the worst Tennessee losses I've ever seen. There's really no way around it. But
to be this Ohio State team with the way that they've been built up, and they play this joke schedule against fake teams. And then they come to the final game, the one you have to win, and you get to play it at home in good weather relative to Ohio in November and all this stuff. It's set for you on an absolute tee, and you get smacked right in the face. 22-point loss. I mean, come on. Michigan's a really good team. They're not a 22-point better than Ohio State in the horseshoe, kind of team. And so that's embarrassing. And how is Tennessee getting punished for this garbage just because Ohio State wants to politic behind closed doors? Well, we played 2 years in a row at the Rose Bowl. We should beat Michigan, you losers. That's dumb. And I can't stand this.
But why would Ohio State want to go to the Orange Bowl instead of the Rose Bowl? Let's think about this. I was texting with somebody last night who works in college football media, and they made a great point. It's like the Big Ten's about to be and include California. And so if you are Ohio State, don't you want to go out there and show that you can, what you are, and be a part of that geographic region as the conference is about to expand and include California? I think over Miami, like, it's the Rose Bowl. It's better. And then there's the second thing is, because it's up to the Rose Bowl, correct? Like, the Rose Bowl makes the decision, and they have the ability to pick, whichever clustered ranked team they want from the Big Ten. Why would the Rose Bowl want Sean Clifford in his 8th year at Penn State and the Nittany Lions that can't score? Like, why does the Rose Bowl want that? This isn't Trace McSorley's Penn State that had a great Rose Bowl game several years ago. They can't do much. Like, Penn State's as boring as it gets if you were to rank, like, I'd rather watch TCU games than Penn State games.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a true cluster situation either. I think they've kind of taken that and run with it. That's like when every team is 9-3 or 10-2. I mean, there's a clear differentiator between Ohio State and Penn State. So who knows? I mean, the Rose Bowl doesn't have to accept Ohio State's request, but at the same time, if somebody's saying, I don't want to go play in your game, are you still going to invite them to that game, or are you just going to move on to Penn State? Like, their kind of back is against the wall as well.
I do wonder if this is overblown, and it's like Kirk Herbstreit being really hopeful of, that he or some game that's being played there, and in reality it is just going to fall to Ohio State, and like they're not, this is something that we're all blowing out of proportion. I feel like, as Tennessee fans are wont to do. I could just see that also being the case, but
it was just an odd time comment from Herbstreit.
It is.
Night.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do wonder, though, if the Cotton Bowl is looking, at another New Year's Six bowl game, and they're looking and they're like, Penn State and Tulane, this is what we're going to get. And nobody's watching that. Penn State and Tulane. Like, that's a terrible game. Yeah, and I think the Rose Bowl, to your point, the Rose Bowl would probably say the same thing. Nobody wants to see this Penn State team, even though they're 10-2 in a terrible league. But like,
don't you think the Orange Bowl probably wants that Tennessee Clemson matchup? I mean, that's the one bowl game matchup that would have a lot of intrigue. It's kind of geographical. Then you got all the Dabo stuff that was said last week and this week, plus the whole orange thing. I mean, it's a dream for them, you would think. You would think that they want Tennessee and Clemson in that game.
I would think so, yeah. Instead of Ohio State. And I think you guys, we brought this up last night when we were texting about, is Bryce Young going to play in a Rose Bowl or the Orange Bowl or whatever non-playoff bowl Ohio State's in? I'm sorry, CJ Stroud, not Bryce Young. Same thing with Alabama and Bryce Young, though. Joe Milton's going to play wherever they go because he's got a job to win.
Mm-hmm.
But those two guys, they're trying to, get $26-30 million by being a top 5 draft pick in April.
Well, and it's two ships sort of passing in the night in terms of the team you would get. It's a dejected Ohio State that blew it, or a Tennessee team in the Orange Bowl. A Tennessee team that would just be incredibly appreciative to be there. 10-2 season, best season since 2003, and we're hyped to get this 11th win. Where Ohio State is going to be, little pouty baby like they are. So
one thing to add to that real quick before you, I am curious, and I was curious about this last Saturday at Vandy's because I went to the UT Vandy game, about what the Vols fan base does and how excited really are they for whatever place they land. I mean, Sugar Bowl, I think they're going to get excited for because that makes sense historically. With the Orange or Cotton, what's the travel like? I know Tennessee fans will always travel well, but in Vandy Stadium, it was a terrible atmosphere because of other reasons that I'm not going to get into right now. But there was like a grumble over the crowd of Vandy fans did not want Tennessee fans to be there, and Tennessee fans that were there were just still pissed off from the South Carolina game and just like, this sucks. Like, it's like you knew Tennessee was up by a lot. It was raining and the stadium sucks. And Tennessee's like, still, a little hurt from that South Carolina game.
I just know from my own friends that don't do what we do, that basically the second that Vandy game ended, texts were being sent like, when are we buying our plane tickets to Miami?
Okay, yeah, that's
so
great.
I don't know. I would certainly, because I love Miami as a city. Also, it's a really fun place to go to. And so I would enjoy going there. Especially just after all the years of Music City Bowl and all, no offense to Nashville, we all love that city.
That's just an easy one for me I get the press box credentials, I get halftime food and everything. That's great when they come. The Vols come here.
Yeah, but like outside of something like that where the travel would be easy, New Orleans and Miami are like right at the top of where I'd want to go. Dallas, fine city. But Dallas to go to Tulane, I think you're going to have real people actually checking out.
Yeah, I think they want. I think they want
play Clemson.
I think that's what it
that's
is.
different.
It doesn't matter what city it's in, as long as they get a shot at Clemson. I think that's the desire. They would go wherever to play Clemson because that would be a huge win. You can kind of have some bragging rights. They haven't played since the Peach Bowl 2003 or 4, and that would be such a huge game. I think it's more about the matchup than the city because, like you said, they're going to go wherever the bowl game's at, pretty much.
I just hope that it actually does end up falling away. Hopefully, we are blowing all of that out of proportion. That would be really nice, and we don't, it's not actually this nightmare scenario that we're all making it out to be. But the point about it not really being a cluster situation is a great one too, and hopefully, I think you're right about that. Like Ohio State and Penn State are not the same, and even if the ranking is remotely close, but hopefully the Rose Bowl sees it the same way. We shall see.
Or maybe USC loses and Ohio State jumps in there anyway, though. I guess Alabama still has a shot somehow.
And this is where I was about to go with the final thing before we're going to talk about Hugh Freeze to end this because I promised on the show that we had on Monday that we would, and we ended up not. It slipped my mind at the end of the show. So we're going to talk about Hugh Freeze getting hired at Auburn just because it's such a hot topic at the moment. But to end this, there are weird scenarios that could unfold this weekend. Fall is in the air, and that means fall grilling with cookouts, tailgate parties, and so much more. Luckily, the flavor experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to savor all the flavors of fall with their mouthwatering assortments of perfectly aged steaks, ultra juicy burgers, and easy-to-prepare comfort meals that are ready in a flash. And now is the perfect time to load up on all this incredible flavor and take advantage of 50% off site-wide by shopping their friends and family sale. Go to omahasteaks.com and use my promo code VOLS, that is VOLS, at checkout and get $30 off your order. And guys, I've said it in these ads for weeks now. I've had all of the stuff from Omaha Steaks. I can't endorse it enough. Everything has been high quality. It comes right to your door, so easy and convenient. And I mean, most importantly, tasty. So I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. So don't wait. Go to omahasteaks.com and stock up today. Omaha Steaks isn't just steak. It's the best steak of your life, guaranteed. And don't forget to score that extra $30 off your order when you use VOLS at checkout, VOLS. Omaha Steaks is perfect for those chilly and busy fall nights. You won't come close to getting this kind of quality at the grocery store. Visit omahasteaks.com. Promo code VOLS at checkout. Minimum order may be required. Omaha Steaks. So I'll throw it to you, Austin. USC and TCU both lose. What happens?
I think TCU's in regardless.
Okay.
Their strength of schedule is better than I realized too.
Well, it was all back-ended, right? I want to say when TCU jumped Tennessee from that 5-4, right? Tennessee loses to Georgia, goes to 5. TCU's up to 4. I thought it was premature because they still had Texas, Baylor, and a couple other in the last game, but they were about to earn their strength of schedule record coming up. They ended up winning those games. Baylor was close. Texas was, shouldn't have been that close either. But, so I think TCU's probably in at this point. USC is interesting too. I think the committee would be interested in watching Georgia and that USC offense. But then if Ohio State didn't just blow it so big against Michigan, then maybe you could justify moving Ohio State back up if USC loses. Because TCU is still undefeated, right? So they're not going to get out. There's nobody else to replace them. I wouldn't put a one-loss Ohio State who didn't win its division above a one-loss TCU that just lost in the conference championship game.
What about a 2-loss USC?
A 2-loss USC, that's where I could see Ohio State jumping up, depending on how close the game is, how the game script kind of plays out.
I kind of think, God, this would be so brutal for TCU, but this is the most cynical way that I could look at it. I don't think the committee wants TCU in this playoff. I don't think they did from the very beginning. I think they were really sort of prepping themselves in a way that was like, it'll take care of itself. TCU is going to play itself out. And then they didn't. And TCU doesn't bring a television audience. The people in Dallas, Texas are all Texas A&M and Texas fans. They are not TCU fans. Believe me, half my family lives there. Nobody's a TCU fan. And so they know what that, and they know that Georgia will stomp a mud hole into TCU in that game. Like they're fully aware of that. As I said, this is kind of the most cynical way I could look at it. I think if TCU loses, they're going to put Ohio State in almost no matter what. Like it just feels that way to me. The more I think about it, because it just, in terms of money and matchup and television ratings and all those things that are the real motivation of the college football playoff. I mean, how are you going to deny Ohio State in that scenario, a one-loss Ohio State versus a one-loss TCU? And yeah, they really dropped a big old goose egg against Michigan. But man, I don't know. You add those together, you put USC up to 3, and if USC wins and TCU loses, USC up to 3, Ohio State in at 4 makes a lot of sense to me. Now, if they both lose, I don't know that they would be so brazen as to go 2-loss USC in over TCU. I don't think they would. I think in that scenario, it would be Michigan, Ohio State, TCU, Georgia. I think in that scenario, and then Alabama still left out. Good Lord, if they put in Alabama in that scenario too.
That would mean the Sugar Bowl for Tennessee, though, if they did.
It's true.
That is true. That is true.
There's no way Bama can get. I think it's Ohio State, and that's it. I think even if both TCU, USC lose, I think TCU's still in. Ohio State jumps up. Seeding, you can mess around with that however you want, 3 and 4. But maybe Ohio State's the 3 and TCU's the 4. But I think TCU's in, unless something catastrophic happens in their conference championship game, like losing their quarterback. And I'm not asking for that, but other circumstances happen at times.
Yeah, I think Alabama, without having a real signature win, that's kind of what's going to keep them out, because their best win's Texas and Mississippi State, which is not that impressive. There's one thing with, it's kind of a pointless question, but if Tennessee had beat South Carolina and everything stayed the same, USC wins this weekend, TCU wins this weekend, would Tennessee jump USC or TCU, or would they have been left out had they beat South Carolina anyway?
I mean, my gut says it's Tennessee. They would be left out. Of course.
If it's undefeated TCU and 1-loss Pac-12 champ USC, and then 11-1 Tennessee.
Yes.
With Hendon Hooker.
Yes.
They would have been left out.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think so.
And that would have been way worse. The fallout from that would have been way worse than the fallout from being ranked 1 spot below Alabama at 7.
I think you do have a want with the playoff, and especially with the to be in the Pac-12, to get the Pac-12 back in. They've only ever been once with Washington.
Twice. Mariota played in.
That's right. The very first one. And they beat Florida State and lost the national championship. That's right. Yeah. So I think there's a real plea. We got to get USC, and they got Lincoln Riley and Caleb, the likely Heisman winner as a quarterback. I think they get the benefit of the doubt there. And then
because in this, actually, I'm going to change. In this scenario, I think Tennessee gets in because the
Hooker
one
would be
loss,
the front runner then, or maybe, yeah.
The one loss is at Georgia, and you beat South Carolina and you blow out Vandy. There's just so many convincing wins on Tennessee's schedule, if that's the case, but it's not, because of Spencer Rattler went nuts for no reason.
Well, and then I mean, the final one, what if LSU actually pulls this off against? I think there's absolutely no chance of that happening in this game. But if they did, if it was singularly that, I
don't think that would change much of anything. Maybe Michigan goes to 1. That's about it.
But you don't think LSU would pop ahead of Tennessee?
No, too far. They're not. They're of
they
Tennessee.
Lost to A&M and head-to-head, so they have a bad loss. Whereas the argument for Alabama is they don't have that bad loss. LSU does. That Texas A&M loss is not quite as bad as South Carolina, but it's right there. Yeah, plus they have 3 losses.
Yeah,
that's brutal. So, well, ultimately, I think the chances are that it's going to just end up being. I don't think TCU is going to lose. I did, but they're playing their best football at the moment, and USC is too. So, I think they'll both make it. And then I say that they're like all going to lose it this weekend. So we'll finish with this. Hugh Freeze, Hubert, the pastor, the great Baptist minister, is now back in the SEC at Auburn. A controversial hire for sure. A lot of people were digging up his past and talking about all of that. I really haven't. I mean, I don't know. I obviously have opinions on it, but I'll start with y'all. Fair or foul bringing Freeze back to Auburn?
I can't say that it's completely foul because I remember campaigning for him to be the offensive coordinator at Tennessee at one point and thinking that they should look past all that stuff. So I can't hate on Auburn for hiring him. And after you missed on Lane with whatever happened in that situation, I think it was probably the best hire they could make. And they've already hired Bruce Pearl, so you got to be comfortable with some stuff that's not exactly above board. I mean, Hugh Freeze gets all the attention for the escort services and the burner phone, but they were tangled up in a NCAA investigation at the time as well. People seem to gloss over that. That would be the bigger concern if I'm Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, Hugh Freeze was going to Chicago to pull 5-star players to Oxford, Mississippi. Like, you know, that's just a big difference of, you know, athletes and people you're going to get. Hugh Freeze just makes me cringe, you know, and so like, I think, you know, I would have been fine if Tennessee or somebody hired him as an offensive coordinator because it's a coordinator position. They're giving him $6.5 million to coach Auburn. I just think with what Auburn's been and how the Brian Harsin almost ended after 1 year with somewhat like there was like an affair that was kind of floated around that was weird. And then Auburn did some weird stuff back in the day with other previous coaches and Bowden and having some weird stuff, marital things happening. And now you're like, oh, well, Hugh Freeze. Okay. You know, he's been at Liberty for a few years. No big deal. He's still the same guy. And he's just cringy to me. His offense works in college. You know, watching Malik Willis play for the Titans this preseason, you can see of how little he helps players go to the NFL at that position. So you're in a spot where you're going to get a coach who's all about winning now. And at some point that's going to limit the quarterback recruiting there too. So, you know, I agree, Zach, that it's the best hire they could have made. I still just think it feels weird.
I do wonder about his offense, though, because he hasn't coached in the SEC since 2016. A lot of things have changed in the SEC since 2016. Is he going to try to go right back in with the same offense or whatever worked at Liberty, which was probably his Ole Miss offense?
Yeah.
I mean, that might not work out the way they think it's going to work out necessarily. I don't think it's like automatic that he's going to go down there and win 10 games a year.
Yeah, I almost take any of the moralizing out of it because there are hypocrites on every single side of this thing. You can start with John Cohen at Mississippi State. I think there's a good argument to be made that he was involved in the downfall of Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss.
Right.
Because that initial story about the hookers and stuff came from a Mississippi State reporter. And maybe he found that all on his own, or maybe Mississippi State's administration had a little.
And wasn't there a linebacker recruit too that took money from Hugh Freeze but committed to State?
Yes, there was. I mean, there was just a ton of that. And then Cohen goes to Auburn and hires this guy, goes up there and says all this nice stuff about him. And just the biggest eye roll of all time watching that. And then Freeze, I mean, as far as he goes, the hooker stuff, that's his own business. You can agree or disagree with him doing that in his life, and I obviously have opinions about that, but as far as it relates to him professionally, I think you look at the other guy at Auburn right now, Bruce Pearl, had a extremely public divorce, and it wasn't because he was the best man on planet Earth, to the point where his wife had a spa in town called Alimonies, and you know, he did all that stuff too, and Bruce is still beloved and hired at Auburn and all, and he had a giant NCAA investigation, all that stuff. They're kind of mirror images of each other in some sense. So, you know, there is that. So there's hypocrites as far as that goes. But Freeze went out into the wilderness, kind of did his time, and he's coming back now. You know, the DM stuff and the Twitter stuff is undoubtedly weird. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, think about that, what you want. I mean, he has literally, to me and Zach both, either tweeted us, direct messaged us at different times after we've said stuff about him on Twitter. Like, he does it to everybody. It's absolutely ridiculous. He's a psycho.
If you say his name, he will find you and DM you and ask your opinion on whatever you're talking about.
Not anymore, though.
Well, yeah, not now.
Well,
at least not from that account. Maybe a burner account.
Yeah, exactly. There's going to be some very pro Hugh Freeze anonymous accounts out there in the future. But beyond that, I mean, the guy's winner in the SEC. What are you going to say? Beat Nick Saban twice.
Mm-hmm.
I can't knock Auburn and go like, well, he doesn't have the pet. No, he absolutely has the pedigree. The guy won 10 games at Ole Miss, which is an incredibly hard job to win at, and beat Nick Saban twice. I don't know. So as far as football goes, that's a good hire. And I think he's still like Freeze. I think the thing that puts off everybody, you were saying he's really cringy.
Yeah.
Like he just puts on this, I'm a man of faith and all this
he's
stuff.
Like Dabo. He's just like Dabo.
Oh, it's sickening. And you already heard stories that he's been reached before he was ever announced as the hire. He was reaching out to players that are committed to Tennessee, allegedly, according to reports I've heard. I want to say I heard it. Basilio was talking about it on his show. That Freeze was contacting kids that are committed to Tennessee at the moment. This dude's a snake still. He's absolutely a snake. That's how you win in college football. That's the nature of college football. You have to, you're playing in a snake pit, so you got to be a viper. Like that just is what it is. And that's the only thing with me that I just go, just shut up with all of this stuff. We all know you have to play the game to be in college football, that you have to be a borderline psycho to be a head coach in college football.
Yep.
And so ultimately it's nuanced, but I think ultimately it's a good football hire for Auburn. I put it that way.
I'm just glad SEC Media Days is in Nashville this summer.
Oh, it is. That's right. Should be a fun one.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze, because I was there in 2017 Media
when
Days.
He filibustered for 15 minutes or whatever.
I was like too. It was like 22 minutes. He talked about his backup walk-on long snapper, so he didn't have to answer questions. And then I believe it was like the following Tuesday or Thursday he was out.
And you have the whole Kiffin element there.
Yeah. Do y'all think that reporter blew up this whole hire? Do you think it was going to be Kiffin and that all that stuff before the Egg Bowl just destroyed any chance of it?
Yes.
I'm curious. I would love to know how it all went down.
Yes.
There could also be the Jimmy Sexton angle of feeding the Mississippi State guy some info about the Ole Miss head coach to get, more money out of Ole Miss to pony up for Kiffin to stay. So, there's a bunch of different ways it could go.
I feel
like Kiffin was worried about his reputation to some extent because he's worked kind of hard to try to, he stayed at FAU for a year longer than he really had to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just feel like he was worried about his reputation, and once that broke, he was going to look really bad negotiating that job before the Egg Bowl.
Yeah. I don't know that it happened exactly like that reporter said. In fact, I don't think it did, but I do not believe for 1 second that he really wants to stay at Ole Miss. I don't believe that at all. I think he wants out of there the nearest convenience that he can find, and that it all got blown up because he sucked at the end of the season, and I think that was bad. And then also, it just that came out and probably threw a wrench in it to whatever extent. But for certain that guy had an extension from that athletic department sitting on his desk for months, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just came off the best season of his entire career there, the only good one of his entire career, frankly, last season. And of course, they're going to try to keep him around knowing that he'll be a hot commodity. And he didn't sign it that entire time. And that news would have come out. So I don't believe that he wanted to stay there at all. And I think in some sense, he might be kind of trapped there if he doesn't have another kind of 10-win season. Oh, we lost Zach.
Yeah, I was about to say, I didn't. He went in the black circle of death there.
Yeah, it looks like he's been struggling. But, well, that is pretty much it.
We covered it all.
Yeah, maybe we can get Zach back, but
no.
There you go. Oh,
he's gone.
So it's just us now. We can.
Yeah, you actually did you do this? Did you have this one prepared?
Well, we had this from like months ago.
Oh.
When you came on, and I've kept it because there were some moments like in an emergency, you would be a dude to hop on here. Right. So I've kept it around. Yeah.
Well, it came in handy when Zach's internet just went and died. So there you go. That's how you be prepared.
Exactly. See, and here it finally came in handy. Austin Stanley, A to Z Sports. I guess obviously you're in house here and the creator of this whole thing that we're doing here, but plug all the stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of YouTube growth over this last football season, so that's awesome, and we're looking forward. Zach Bingham and I are looking forward to a lot of growth in the first quarter of 2023, and hopefully things can go our way when it comes to the Vols and the bowl game situation. But no, we're pretty pumped on this. So make sure you like everything, share, subscribe, do it all, and appreciate everybody for following us along the way.
Absolutely. Austin Stanley, A to Z Sports. I'm Charlie Burris. That was Zach Reagan. We'll see if we can get a hold of him. But I think that's it for the rest of this week as far as we go. So we'll talk to y'all next week.